The year is 1997. The hit JRPG series Final Fantasy has 6 games in Japan and 3 in America due to incumbency, and none in Europe, because fuck those guys, right? The biggest game at the time was Final Fantasy VI, but also known as Final Fantasy III and also known as Nothing. This game showed an industrial theme, not seen in the series or many RPGs in general up to that point. The game felt heavily based on British Industrial Revolution, which led us to modern life with advancements and the overall creation of modern technology. This also hinted at the start of the game where they say technology is advancing and reviving the world after the War of Magi 1,000 years ago. Soundtrack, graphics, gameplay and story and almost pretty much everything else made Final Fantasy VI, 3, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Anyway, it made the game overall very fun and a huge success, but Square knew that they had to do better with their next game. It had to be bigger. It had to break the boundary of cartridges. In 1994, Nintendo revealed their Project Reality console, at the time named the Ultra 64, would use cartridges due to piracy issues with CDs. This angered many game developers and publishers to move on to Sony's offering instead of Nintendo's in the next generation. But in that group of developers, Square was amongst them. They made a few more games for the SNES, such as Super Mario RPG and Chrono Trigger, but they moved on quickly from Nintendo. Development of this new Final Fantasy game began right after the release of Final Fantasy VI 3. Fuck! Anyways, development lasted 2 years, and on January 31st, 1997, Final Fantasy VII would release in Japan, and America got their first taste of the complete game in Atlanta, Georgia. For E3 took place that year at that location. That's a story for another day. Anyway, in September, America got their taste of Blu-ray pie that Japan was cooking over in their oven as Final Fantasy VII was released. Wait, Final Fantasy VII? Yeah, Square said fuck it and just called it Final Fantasy VII and not Final Fantasy IV. And I bet America went batshit insane after that. Maths teachers screamed everywhere thinking they couldn't count. And Europe finally got Final Fantasy as Final Fantasy. So wait, they didn't change the name in Europe either? Well, why didn't they? It makes more sense to change Europe's title since no other Final Fantasy games were released in Europe. Well, at least in America, they had games, so it wasn't as weird. It was tolerable at the very least. No games were made before it in the franchise, so it wasn't worth changing the fucking name! They probably didn't change the name because we might have thought Final Fantasy was some obscure Amiga series or something. The only evidence Europe had of Final Fantasy not being in Europe before were magazines that saying stuff such as Final Fantasy finally comes to Europe. But anyway, the game follows Cloud Strife, an ex-mercenary who is paid to do jobs and is paid to destroy some Midgar reactors and narrates Shinra. If you don't know, Midgar is the city ran by Shinra, which is split into layers like an onion. The top layers are posh areas like London, and the lower parts are the slums and the technology. Technology! Cloud falls from an explosion at 6-5, and he falls on flowers, which softens his fall. But then on the way down, some girl named Eris. God damn it. Anyway, she falls in love with the blonde wonder boy, but she's murdered, and insert risk game here, where Cloud gets pissed off at Sephiroth for killing her, and he gets his bloody slow ass ass. And he thought he killed him 7 years ago. Nope. Well, now that all of that is over, let's get into the main part of the review, the juicy part, whatever you want to call it. Firstly, the graphics. The graphics don't look too bad for a PlayStation 1 game. The stages are pre-rendered like in Donkey Kong Country, but each sprite is layered. It makes the game feel more realistic, but it can even go under layers, which is pretty unique. The 3D models are the next topic. To be honest, they look better during gameplay rather than in cutscenes. They look more dated in cutscenes, and the model used in free roam and battle mode still look pretty decent today. The music is also pretty cool, and it includes some of the best PlayStation 1 tracks of all time in my opinion. I'm blasting you with music in the background right now actually. The colours are also pretty good, and while some work with the scenery, some others don't, but it creates a divide between the industrial world and the magic worlds. That's pretty cool. Now we've gotten graphics out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay. The game plays like if Grim Fandango met Final Fantasy VI when it comes to free roaming. The camera is locked at certain places most of the time when not traversing the world map, but there are exceptions, hence why I called it basically Grim Fandango. The controls on free roaming feel very, very, very good and clean somehow. Now for battles, they're basically 3D versions of the Final Fantasy VI combat system. You have a timer which adds a need for quick strategy. Each turn you have, and the time you can't attack, you have to think about what you can use next in order to deal the most damage, and also have something at the end of the battle. And much like in Final Fantasy VI, you can now have 3 people in a battle party at a time, and characters are added to your party when you find them, although some characters such as Vincent are optional. In fact, I think he's the only one who's actually optional. Each character has a limit break, which is a stronger attack which is unleashed on selected foe. These often go towards using your weapon, and each character has multiple limits at once, but you only start off with one for each character, and you have to wait for a bar to fill up by battling to use a limit. While this is the second time we saw limit breaks, it kind of set the mark for limit breaks being used in every Final Fantasy game ever since 6 and 7, so it's basically become a staple because of this game, as well as the 6th one. You can also use magic during battles, in which you have to use potions and ether, oh for fuck's sake. Anyway, you have to use them to get better magic because it's not unlimited. You have to use it wisely. So that was combat. What if I told you there was racing? Yep, you can use Chocobo to race other players, and this created another game based on that alone. Also, this game's length spans 3 CD-ROMs. Technically that falls under gameplay. So now the final verdict. I'll give this game an 8 out of 10. It is my second favourite RPG of all time. It's in my top 15 best games of all time. Yep, only the top 10 gets a 9 out of 10 in my book. But one thing I saved for this moment was during part of the game where Cloud tries to remember who he is. We often saw flashbacks of a guy with black hair named Zack. Well, what about when Cloud and Zack were friends? Well, my video on Crisis Core, which I uploaded to my main channel and is up right now, ready for you to see, shows you where the story continues, or started. But anyway, if you want more of my content, you can always check out my channels on Glare, Fiddly, or even YouTube. If you want more geek content not made by me, you can always make sure to check out the IOX channel and leave them a follow or subscribe depending on where you're on. This will not be the only time I appear on IOX since I have plans for future content. But anyway, it's time we roll the credits. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.